Once again, and we're back with our traveling microphone for oral history here in Marshall County. Tonight I believe it's 105 West Ninth Street, the home of Roy Boyd. Mr. and Mrs. Boyd have lived here for a good while. How long did you say you lived here?
About 50 years in this one place.
Uh-huh.
I've lived 76 years on this street.
Mrs.
Holly
Boyd,
Street.
your given name is Sylvia, is
Right.
that right? And you've lived how many? 70?
I've lived 76 years on this one street. It used to be Bearden Street.
It seems to be home then.
It certainly takes a heap of living to make a house a home.
Edgar
We lived
A.
in this
Guest,
house about 50 years. We built it originally in 1935.
Are you a Marshall Countian? Were you born
I
here?
was born in the New Harmony community.
And who were your parents?
My father was Hardy McGregor. My mother was Lucy Reeves McGregor. My grandfather at first I'll tell you, the McGregors came here from South Carolina, and my father was one of the 6 boys that came here from South Carolina. And the Reeves came here from Tennessee. And my grandfather on my mother's side was William Reeves. My grandparents on my mother's side was William Reeves and Johanna Elizabeth Binkley Reeves. My grandparents on my father's side was James Monroe McGregor and Gatley Gertrude Davis McGregor. Now, my daddy is a direct descendant of Jefferson Davis. He's always told us this, that Jefferson Davis and my daddy's grandfather, Albert Davis, were first cousins. And,
Well, Jefferson Davis was born over in, I guess that's still Christian County there at Fairview. Anyway, it's not too far out of Hopkinsville.
where the Elton
The big
monument is.
monument, the copy of the Washington Monument, which is 351 feet tall, as I recall, 355 or something like that. Beautiful place there. And, you know, it's odd in a way that both presidents during the war between the states were born in Kentucky.
Well, that's good. Kentucky's, well, to me, Benton's the garden spot of the world. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Well, what part of the county were you born?
New Harmony, down about 5 miles out. And my daddy's always told me this. Dr. Woodall rode a horse from the Woodall, when you know where that Woodall farm is.
Yes, sir.
Rode a horse for saddleback and brought me into this world and charged him 75 cents.
I believe you're worth more than that.
Well, he's always told me that. It's quite a bit different from today, though, because I just had a new one, and I know your great-grand.
Now, who is your new great-grand? We'll get off the topic a minute, but we'll come back to that.
Well, my new great-grand is the son of Charlie Bryan and Phil Flat Bryan. Phil taught school several years here, and Charlie is an attorney for Levitt and Levitt. And the new baby's name is Martin Boyd Bryan. And they're going to call him Bo. Now, I got that in, and I had an interview, or you'd interviewed me, rather, several months ago. I would have got this in the history.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't come before I
Because
did.
he's just 2.5 weeks old.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Now, your parents, when did they come to Benton?
We moved to Benton in 1908, and my daddy came here to be deputy sheriff under Lewis Wallace. He served 4 years under Lewis Wallace, and then he served a part of time under Joe Darnell. And he was made the first marshal, and call him police now, of Benton. My daddy was.
Well, what an honor.
And I remember him being called to the courthouse, a big call to town, the night the courthouse burned. We lived about 2 blocks down the street from here. But as I say, I was 4 years old when we moved to Benton, and I've lived on this one street. I've never moved but 3 times in my life.
And it was all on the Bearden Street or...
I moved from New Harmony up here.
Well, there are not many people, I imagine, that could equal that kind of a record.
Well, I've been fortunate in and having a good home and a good place to stay. And
Did you have any brothers and sisters in the family?
I had a brother, Guy McGregor. He passed away in 1960. And I have a sister, Ruby McGregor Castleberry. She was married to W.S. Castleberry, who is deceased.
Well, since you came that young in life, you probably went to school here.
I went to school here all of my life. I entered school here. My first teacher was Miss Minnie Kuykendall. First grade teacher was Miss Minnie Kuykendall. Then I had Miss Reba Heath, Miss Mamie Nanny Eads, and Miss Ada Darnell Loud, and Miss Regina Pace. I think you said you knew her. She lived at Hardin.
Yes, I remember.
She
She
was
was, what did we
You
call
said
them? Cashier in the bank or
She said
something
she
like
worked in
that?
the bank. And then my high school teachers were Clyde Philbeck. I sort of believe he came from Hardin, didn't he? Or do you remember?
I believe that's
His sister
true.
married a Youngblood up there.
Yes,
That.
Pearl
Young-
Philbeck married Clyde Youngblood.
I always had a funny tale about her. Elma Rowe, she was in our class, and we had to answer the roll call with a quotation. She couldn't think of one, and Elma Rowe said, well, say, hitch your wagon to a star and drive, drive, drive. Of course, that wasn't English, that's all. Well, when she answered that, she was so proud of herself. She said, hitch your wagon to a star and drive, drive, drive. Well, that just, everybody just
Broke
hollered.
up.
I didn't even have that one written down to tell you about it, but I just happened to think about it.
I remember Pearl and Clyde's children. Let's see, there was I was on the Hardin debate team, and one was named Phil, about a year behind me, and then the older boy was Joe Taylor, Youngblood.
I didn't know them. I just remembered her.
They operated the garage in Hardin, at least when I knew them.
Well, then one of the highlights of my high school career was we had a teacher, Miss Hilda Aaron Height. So she put on a play here, and it must have been so good. I don't remember, but anyway, we were invited to Hardin to put that play on in Hardin School. We had to go on a train. Had to stay all night in a hotel in Hardin. I think you said it's the
Warren Hotel. I remember it well.
Of course, we had to come home, but that was all of that was the most fun to us. Going away from home and staying in a hotel. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. So that was one of the highlights.
And riding the train,
Yeah.
that's a big thrill, always was to me.
That's the only way we had to get around. The roads were so bad. And then I graduated in 1923, and then went on to Bowling Green. It was a normal school then, I think, and I sort of believe
Yes.
Murray was
started-
being built then Monday.
It started in 1906 and was a normal school, and then Murray, of course, was authorized in 22 and opened in 23.
I thought it was being built when I went up there.
In fact, they didn't even have the building finished in 23. They met in the old Murray High School building for that first year.
Well, and of course I didn't go very long. I got my teacher's certificate and came back home and taught school at Bryansburg, my first school at Bryansburg in 1923 and 24. Of course, we were paid back then on the amount of students we had. I think I made about $64 a month. Thought that was awful good money, the first money I'd ever made.
64? Well, that sounds like a lot.
I think we were paid back then according to the number of students you had enrolled. And they told me when I went over there that they sort of had taken advantage of the teachers, and I'd have to start off kind of stern or get my bluff in them. So I whipped 9 boys one day for slipping off and going to a wheat thresher. After that, I had pretty good conduct.
Yes. You let them know you meant business.
And some of the children that went to school with me at Brownsburg were the Greenfield children, and the McWaters boys, the Mobleys, and the Carnes. And of course, Albert Carnes was, I think he was an attorney. He's retired now.
Yes, I remember him in
Oh,
Paducah.
he was so studious, and I was so afraid he'd ask me something I didn't know. I really learned more when I taught school than I did when I went to school because I studied my lessons. every day the day before. I was afraid Albert was going to ask me to solve a problem or something I didn't know how. So then,
That's great. Now, did I hear you say that you went to school part of the time with Ezra Blumenberg?
yes, he graduated the year before I did. He graduated in 1922. But I didn't graduate till 23.
Yes.
And then I went on down to Saul, 2 miles down the road, the next year and taught school at Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the students that went there were the Homer Solomon up here, one of them, and the Dreyfus, the Dreyfus children, and the Chumner boys, Orvis and Ray and Robert and William Wesley, and then R.A. Faust and Kate Faust. And all this.
William Wesley was my teacher at Hardin.
Oh, you're making it feel so old. Yeah, he had 5 brothers,
Uh-huh.
and he was the 6th one. They all went to school together. And I didn't like teaching too well, so I took a business course at Miss Dorian's private school in Paducah. I went back and forth on the train.
I remember Miss Marion Doran, I believe her name.
Yeah, she was a daughter.
Uh-huh.
Mrs. Dorian, I don't remember her first name, I believe it was Kate. But anyway, after I got through with my course, I was hired as a secretary for the Prudential Insurance Company. And I worked there for 4 years till I married Roy Boyd in 1929.
I was going to ask you when you married. So it was 29, everything was booming, but before the year ended,
It was during the Depression we always
had
said.
inkling of a depression, didn't we?
Mhm.
Black Thursday came on, I believe it was October the 29th. And
Well, I was
stock market lost $10 billion and so on. And then 30, 31, 32, 33, we had real rough times.
Yes, my son, let's see, my son, Bob Boyd, was born in 1930. And my daughter, Judy Boyd Flatt, was born in 1932. And Bob lives on 18th Street. I think he used to live out there.
Oh, yes, lived right almost, well, Miss Darnell was between us, but we were almost side by side.
And Judy, of course, lives next door with her family. I have 3 grandchildren. As I've just told you about, the first one was Phil, who has the new baby. Mm-hmm. And then Fran Flatt, she works in Paducah at the Spouse Abuse Center as assistant director. And then, of course, I have 1 grandson, Stephen Boyd Flatt. He is now 14 years old, and he is 6 feet, 5.5 inches tall, and weighs about 195 pounds.
How old is he?
14.
14. Well, now he'll be the center on the basketball.
He's been playing football. We went to see him the last game Tuesday night. He likes football really better than he does basketball, but I hope he'll play basketball because I don't know anything about football except for to make a touchdown. And I saw him make my first live touchdown. I didn't really go care much about football. First game I went to, he made a touchdown. Of course, that thrilled me good.
Well, of course. Certainly it would. Well, can you tell us anything about the changes you've seen around the Benton business district?
Yeah, I want to get to that in a minute, but first I'm going to tell you about this lot.
All right.
Roy bought this lot from the Stilly heirs. It was full of ditches. When I went to school, I walked in ditches over my head up through here. And when they remodeled the elementary school, we bought the dirt to fill up these ditches for 10 cents a wagon load, and Levi Borland hauled the dirt and filled up the ditches.
Mm-hmm.
We bought 1/4 of this square for practically nothing. And previous to our acquiring it, used to be a show come to town, and they would put their tent up there. It was a talking movie show, Aidlot's show.
Uh-huh.
He would show the movie, and then he'd talk off. We didn't have any hearing at home. He would talk and tell us what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, on Tater Day, everybody would put their horses and mules and wagons up there. And then, of course, after we get settled, after the ground settled and so forth, we built here in 1935.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you remember an old show that it was a stage show that came around every year called Bisbee's Comedian?
Oh, yes, it was over on about a lot where the Bank of Marshall County is now. Then one time, I can't tell you too much about this, but there used to be a Chautauqua that would come uptown, up on the school grounds. It came about 2 summers, I remember.
Mhm.
It was a little more high-class show than,
Yes.
I don't remember too much about it. I just remember the name and going. And then you said about uptown, you know, I haven't heard all your reports, and I might be repeating, but
Well, that doesn't really matter if we repeat some.
the building, which is known to modern day as the Morgan Heath that recently burned uptown,
Yes, sir.
it was formerly, back when I remember, run by my Uncle Bill Nack McGregor, and it was known as McGregor Hardware. We have some furniture in the family now that has McGregor Hardware stamps on the back of it. And they lived right up the street here. And that was before Morgan and Heath. And then south of it, on Main Street, was once the post office and once the Tribune office. They've been moved several times since then. And
I found an old photograph that showed the post office there, which I never knew that was true. I do remember, of course, when the Tribune was there.
mhm. And then I don't know if anybody's ever told this about the Methodist Church being up here on Olive Street.
No, I don't remember ever hearing that.
Well, when we first moved here on the corner of 13th and Olive, which is now known as Miss Maud Williams' house,
Yes.
the Methodist Church was originally there. And when they moved to their present location, Noah Mathis put in a theater there. And that was the first theater I remember being in Benton.
Well, as far as I had ever heard before, people said, well, the Methodist Church was always there. But, of course, always is a long time.
And that's a long time ago, but it was originally there. And then on the court square where the city hall is now, it was a very pretty building, and Solon Palmer. Have you ever heard that? Solon Palmer lived
that
there.
That name appears in all of the Marshall County histories.
Well, he was the president of the Bank of Benton then, and the Bank of Benton then was located where Lovett's office is.
Yes.
And Solon Palmer lived in this house where the city hall is now, and I think it was later turned into the Methodist parsonage. I think the last people I remember living in that last Methodist preacher was Brother Fowler. He has a daughter here, Mrs. Van Roberts.
Mrs. Van Roberts.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah.
See, I think they lived in this.
Mhm.
I think they were still Methodist parsons then. I'm not sure, but it used to be Methodist parsons. And do you ever remember a big bell being up in the courthouse yard that was used as a fire alarm?
I don't remember that.
Big iron bell up in the courthouse yard. And they rang that when we had a fire. My daddy had his first grandchild up there one time, Barbara Franklin, and she rang that bell. Of course, all the businesses ran out on the street to see where the fire was. She says she remembers Punk Nelson and his father running out. She was little, but she remembers them. And
false alarm.
yeah, and then Clay Donald mentioned the hotel being where the National Store is now.
Yes.
That was run by Miss Belle King-Solvin, and she was the mother of the late George and John Ed and Gretchen Long. And she later married a King-Solvin and had twin daughters, Mildred and Nettie. We went to school. I went to school with them, and they lived in that hotel uptown, and so I envied them because they lived uptown in a hotel.
And you lived way off down here.
Yeah. And then I don't think this has ever been mentioned. Across the street from the hotel, where the federal loan is now, was a hotel. It was formerly Judge Price's home. And Uncle Jim McDaniel run that as a hotel back about a long time ago. I think Roy has said that he took some meals there. Anybody could eat there that wanted to. And then there's another business that I think I heard somebody mention this, though. On the corner where the Bank of Marshall County is now, Mr. Cross printed the Tribune one time. And then between that building and where Miss Georgia Brandon's house is was a big white house. Now it's occupied by Dobie Landrum and his wife, Miss Annie, and he ran the first Ford agency that I remember, and it was located then where Phillips Chevrolet is now. Then later, Mr. and Miss Horace Riley lived in that house and ran a hotel there. They are the father of Chloe Jane
Yes.
Riley Hardesty. Father and mother Riley parents. And I believe most of the other businesses around the square have been mentioned, except I heard Gladys talk about the Barnes, T.E. Barnes, and the Roy Griffith store that was located where the Hauser store is.
Mhm.
They used to make hats, have a millinery shop up on that balcony. And Mrs. Eads, she was the mother of Miss Nanny Eads, who was one of my teachers, made hats. And later, Miss Addie Griffith, Addie Hayden Griffith worked there. And,
Did you always try to get a new bonnet for Big Singing Day?
oh, I was going to tell you about that. On Big Singing Day, we had to have a new dress. And everybody had to meet the train. You see, all they just came in the train loads back then. And then, yes, Big Singing, the yard was full of people, and most of the time it'd be hot. You couldn't hardly get through the courthouse yard then for people. And I ate my first ice cream cone on Big Singing Day. But I believe that was before I moved
What
to
was
Benton.
it expensive?
Well, I don't know what the first one cost, but I remember they was just a nickel, and then if you'd save your money late in the afternoon, they'd be 2 for a nickel.
2 for a nickel.
Oh,
That's
gee.
great.
Yes. And then I was going to tell you, on down north from the hotel, I don't believe anybody's mentioned these businesses. Clay Darner mentioned P.B. Sun, but I think it was down this way. P.B. Sun had a bakery and a butcher shop. And then Jim Johnson had a mill on down.
Made cornmeal and maybe flour.
Flour. And then right on the corner where the Bank of Benton is now, there was a blacksmith shop operated by Billy Wilkerson. And he had the first Ford that I ever remember being in Benton. But I was going to tell you about Mr. Palmer. Let's back up a little bit. He had the first car I ever rode in. And he'd drive up and down the street in the afternoon, and we kids would stand on the side of the street and say, "Oh, Mr. Palmer, let's ride." He would stop and take us for a ride. And that's the first car I ever rode in. And of course, like I said, Billy Wilkerson had the first Ford that I remember of. And I developed Tacoma, which is now known as my everyday name. It's a granulate leads in my eyes.
Mhm.
And Dr. Washburn wanted me to go up to Paducah to have the operation, but he didn't want me to ride on the train because I wanted to get some cinders in my eyes. So my daddy hired this Billy Wilson to take us in this Ford. And the roads were so bad, it took so long to go there. And I know you've heard of Salyers Hill, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Well, I've always heard it. They had to really give it the gas to get up that Salyers Hill. So that was one of the things I remember. And
Yeah, it's all rolled down in you.
I was going to something back there I thought of. We talked about your father-in-law. I went to school with him. And something I'd like to mention. Is the time about up?
We've got about 2 minutes.
Well, I'd like to mention some of my classmates that aren't
Good.
dead.
Good.
There may be some more of them, but these are Mary Ann Jones, Marvel Tyree Smith, Reba Treese Moeller, Miranda Young. She lives in Paducah. And Eugene Griffith and Carl Bohannon. Now, Eugene Griffith was at the last big singing. I think you remember seeing him.
I remember that. Yes.
He was one of I graduated with him. And there may be some others that live in, but they're the other ones I know of.
Well, that brings back a lot of memories to.
I'd like to mention something else right quick. I was aimed to ask you about it before we started. Marshall County was once part of Callaway County, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it was till 1842.
All right, when they separated, Roy's father, Alfred Boyd from Trigg County, was one of the commissioners that helped establish the line.
I remember reading that.
It hasn't, not too long ago, it's in the paper, and I couldn't find it to tell exactly, but
I didn't know it was related to Mr.
it
Boyd.
was Roy's father, Alfred Boyd.
Uh-huh.
Roy was born in Trigg County, and all of his folks lived there.
Very good. Well, you have put on a sterling performance.
Now I beat you tonight. I've really done all the talking.
The guest is supposed to do all the talking.
I didn't intend to, but I didn't know I was taking up that much time either.
Well, that's wonderful. We appreciate all the effort you've put into it and your gracious invitation to visit. It's good to see you and Mr. Boyd still in a lovely home and still able to enjoy life.
My motto is keep on keeping on. I'm not still a minute. I just keep on keeping on. Now, Roy doesn't get around too good, but he's in good health.
Mm-hmm.
He's 88 years old.
Very fine, and thank you so much, Mrs. Roy Boyd, Sylvia, her given name. She was a McGregor. That's all the time we have for oral history today. This is Ray Mofield returning you to our studios in Benton.